Hello, you amazing people. You're listening to the Marketing and Coffee Podcast, the show that brings you the latest in marketing, especially in the UAE market, with your host, Lijo Etup.
Welcome to another episode of Marketing and Coffee podcast with Lijo. I today have Mike Alnaji on the podcast. Did I get your name right, Mike?
100%. You did. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to have you today. So today we'll be talking about one of the biggest black holes in marketing, which is the influencer marketing. So today Mike will speak about it. And the reason why he's here is that he's a digital marketing consultant with over 6 years experience in digital marketing, influencer marketing, and social media. Having worked at both agency and client sides, he understands the needs from the client side and the agency side. So he has delivered campaigns ranging from integrated digital campaigns to viral content and like pretty much everything in between. So he understands the business needs and combines it with the market situation and consumer behaviors. And that helps him to get the digital product and the marketing as a means to deliver the business objectives. So that's amazing because one of the biggest challenges in today's scenario is to deliver on the business objectives, and the marketing objectives have changed. So Mike has worked for a variety of global and regional clients from various industries. He has engineered influencer marketing strategies for several brands across the region and executed dozens of campaigns with influencers that have proven to be an ROI positive. That's amazing. I said no other better person than Mike to come on this podcast and talk about it. So my first question, based on your experience, how is the influencer marketing landscape in the Middle East?
Totally. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on board. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I think, look, the influencer marketing landscape in the Middle East is continuing to be on the rise. There have been a lot of recent events and a lot of negativity in the past couple of weeks about influencer marketing and a few things happening in a few different countries, which I won't necessarily get into in too much detail, but the need for influencer marketing from a brand perspective is definitely there. It is achieving a lot of different objectives, so it's gaining much more traction as we move on every year. So if you take a look at, for example, influencer marketing in 2017 versus 2018, in one of the studies for influencer marketing that I actually done a while back, every brand manager that at the time I had sat with and interviewed was actually dedicating more money towards influencer marketing from their 2018 budget versus their 2017. And that has continued to be the case up until 2020.
So coming back to the present situation, 2020 has brought in a lot of challenges. So one of the biggest challenge is, the only challenge is COVID, right? Has it had an impact in the way influencer marketing has worked?
Good question. I think, look, we definitely are. It's unfortunate that we're going through a global pandemic, right? And 2020 has been such a busy year, I think, with everything happening around the world. It definitely will change the landscape of influencer marketing temporarily, as in once the global pandemic was at an all-time high, influencer marketing in essence took the back seat when it comes to things such as promotional campaigns and more tactical campaigns, but it also opened a door of opportunities for different brands to actually run brand campaigns that focus more on heartfelt and emotional messaging to build brand affinity. So it has affected it to a certain extent. There's also a lot of industries that I've been hearing are going through different restructuring and budget cuts after the global pandemic, and that will have an impact on marketing as a whole, and influencer marketing is one of those touch points. It does seem to me though, at least in the UAE at the moment, is that the influencer marketing scene, let's say, is picking up a bit more over the past, let's say, month. I've seen a lot more brands executing a lot more campaigns than, let's say, 3 months ago. But that has also affected the way that influencers do business right now. So we are seeing a lot more of barter deals happening with a lot of influencers as well. And that's usually not the case because it's usually pay and play rather than just a barter deal. So that's been interesting to see how that's panned out with everything going on.
Yeah, so it brings some interesting. So since it's a paid medium, okay, in some form or the other, do you feel that in the consumer mind, there's lack of trust in this entire format of influencer marketing? Has there been erosion, or do you feel that it's still strong in terms of consumer trust?
So look, I think if we look at it as an industry as a whole, there is definitely trust from the consumer's mind. Otherwise, it wouldn't be an industry that has a lot of money being put into it globally. At the same time, there could be a lack of trust with a certain consumer and a certain influencer or content creator. And that could simply be put or allocated to the reason that these influencers or content creators have not really put in a lot of research and work on the type of content that they are creating, or they have made poor business decisions of taking collaborations that do not fit within their personal brand. But at the end of the day, if I love X brand and I'm a natural user of X brand and I happen to be paid to promote their products, my audience will also understand that. I believe that consumers are very well educated about influencer marketing right now. They understand that it's there to stay, and it's just really about filtering through it. At the end of the day, influencer marketing has been here for hundreds of years in different forms and shapes. Maybe it's not necessarily the influencer marketing that we're talking about today of social media and posting, but there's always been, influencer marketing has existed for years and years, just in different forms. And it comes down to the influencer or the content creator being able to create content that's authentic and resonates with the customer, to be able to tell a story in a compelling way. And that's what it really is. So certain influencers may have lost trust alongside some brands that have worked with them in the consumer's mind, but the far majority have not. Influencer marketing is definitely effective, or else brands wouldn't be investing in it as a touch point.
Very valid point. And the thing is, recently I was speaking to a group who are mostly into nano influencers, and there is always this confusion: influencers, micro influencers, nano influencers. Influencers industry, as you rightly said, brands are investing huge, and supposedly the influencer market will double in the next 5 years' time. Can you simplify this for my audience? Like, how do we differentiate between influencers, micro influencers, nano influencers, and how do we treat them differently?
Sure. So look, I think in terms of lingo, right? So in general, nano influencers are influencers who have anything under 10,000 followers. I think that's like the general standard. I think if you go to an agency or a brand and you go to different agencies and different brands, each one will have their own classification. But in general, at the moment, they're being classified based on follower base, if you will. Micro influencers, I would say probably around 10 to 50K. Anything more than that would probably be, you can classify as a general influencer. And then you also have macro influencers or celebrity influencers that jump up into millions of followers across the different social media platforms. In essence, the best way to approach this is that I believe that each different influencer category or type, if you will, serves a different purpose within the marketing funnel and achieves a different objective. For example, if I'm looking at a new product launch and I want mass awareness, I would definitely choose macro or celebrity influencers to be able to tick off that box of reach, right, and awareness. Versus, it really depends on what it is that you're launching and everything. But I do believe that a lot of the 360 campaigns that I have personally executed include all different tiers of influencers or types of influencers, because they serve a different purpose. They don't necessarily all work together and create content at the same time. We just pan it out across the campaign period.
Interesting. So how do I choose an influencer for my brand? What's the checklist I show? Should I use a big influencer, nano influencer, micro influencer? Is there a checklist? What should I go to thought process in my mind while I'm choosing an influencer?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost is taking a look at the business objective, right? What is it that you want to achieve out of this collaboration? It could simply just be brand association and the value that this influencer brings for your brand to be associated with him or her. It could be traffic to your website or app downloads, or it could be sales on your website, or it could be bringing people to a certain new store that you've launched or a certain location. It could also simply be awareness about a more tactical campaign that you have coming up, or simply put brand awareness. You really need to map out the business objective first and foremost. And then afterwards, you would be able to understand what category of influencers you would want to choose to work with. And then the most important part, and this is where I believe a lot of content creators or influencers, as well as brands and agencies, struggle across the board, is mapping out the different types of influencers and doing their research prior to actually choosing that influencer and working with that influencer. So usually what I like to look at in terms of checklist is, I think first and foremost, does this person really, is he or she interested in my brand? Do they fit within my brand? So I think them as a personal brand and my brand, is there chemistry there or not? The other thing is, this person a natural user of my brand or product that I have? Does it make sense? Does their content that they create, does it make sense? Is it something that I would also use on my social media platforms as a brand? Is it something that I can republish and run ads with or not? And then I go into, that's the first part, but then I also go into taking a look at their follower base, taking a look at their demographics, obviously understanding that my business objective and who my target audience is, and if this influencer makes sense to work with because of their follower base and their demographics. Are they located in the cities or countries that I want to acquire customers from, as an example? Are they within the same age range, or do they have the same interests or not? So definitely taking a look at that, mapping and double checking that there's no fake followers on their accounts, and then taking it from there. So once all of that has been done is when I would approach an influencer thereafter to even start a conversation with them. So it's a bit of, the way that I see it is that influencer marketing is half science and half art. There's a lot of judgment calls and creativity that goes into it, but then there's also a lot of numbers and data and science to be able to deliver on those business objectives.
You mentioned an important point called fake followers. So how, as a business owner or a brand, can I check about the fake followers? Is there any tool that I can use, or are we dependent on what the influencer is talking?
Yeah, so look, there's several ways to do it. There's different tools that will show you that, and there's several ways to look for it, right? So there are tools online. If anyone just searches for Instagram account analysis tool or Instagram followers analysis tool online, they'll find a lot of different options, and the majority of those would be free to try. The more advanced ones are obviously paid on a subscription or a service level. There's a few ways to look at it. Number one, it could be that you look at the historical data through a tool of their follower base and what is the growth. Does the growth look natural or not? But then again, if you've purchased fake followers or bots, some people have now, been smart enough to actually phase it out in terms of growth. Another thing that you can do is use a standalone tool and not just rely on the demographics that the influencer sends you. And there are some tools that will capture where, for example, when you have gender breakdown or percentage breakdown for countries or location, you will get a high percentage that says unknown, which then immediately gives you a flag of something looks weird. There's also the good old fashioned old school way of doing things, is just very quickly open their account, see their followers, and skim through them like a good 10-15 minutes. You can easily tell and see if there's a lot of profiles that don't have a profile picture, or if you open them, they don't really have followers, or they're following thousands of people, but they're not there. Obviously, the more scientific and correct way to do this is with the tool, but then it depends on your brand. How much do you run influencer marketing? Do you have the resources or capabilities to pay for software or not?
Yeah, I also look at what is the kind of engagement that they're getting, and if the engagement seems considerable, then I go down to filter it, like as I said, the profile. There's so many influencers with followers, which is clearly is a bot.
Yeah, so some of them have gotten a bit more advanced, where what they do is they purchase followers like bots, but then they also continuously purchase a lot of likes or comments as well. So engagement rate is definitely an indicator to make sure that, versus follower base, to make sure that there's a healthy engagement rate. And that's something that we would screen at the very beginning, to your point. But sometimes I have, noticed a lot of cases where there's, let's say, fake engagements from bots as well.
Yeah.
I think it's extremely important, though, to also say that while we're talking about this topic and talking about fake followers and talking about engagement and all of this, it's quite unfortunate, and I'd like to use this platform because it's quite unfortunate that we tend to focus on a lot of the negative in influencer marketing, because there's definitely a lot of content creators that are amazing, that are putting in a lot of work, have 100% genuine followers, and have worked extremely hard to get to where they are. I think, though, when I put on my brand hat, it's definitely important to make sure that the money that I'm investing is ROI positive and not just going to waste, right?
So that brings me to another interesting question is about now, since we've decided on which kind of influence is going to work, what is a brand fit, what is the best way to engage, how do we create content with them? Because it's very important that we get the content and to send the right brand message. So how do we approach that?
Totally. I think, look, this part is a make it or break it in an influencer marketing journey. It's extremely important that the content is authentic, resonates with their follower base, and also ticks off brand requirements. Before going into that and before approaching influencers with and talking content, I think as a brand, you need to know what type of campaign it is that you're running. Is it I brief the influencer and they create the content and then send it back, I give my blessings, and then they post? Or is it a co-branded campaign that's where influencer marketing is just one touch point of a bigger 360 campaign, for whether that's a more tactical campaign or part of a new product launch or what? And that's where the brand is leading more on the content production, but at the same time working very closely with the influencer to get their input on things. So I've done a lot of campaigns, whether it's this type or this type, and when it's a brand-led campaign, it's extremely important. What we do initially is we have a sit down with the influencer and tell him or her, look, here's the idea that we have, for example, for this video that we're working on that we'd like you to be in. We feel that you're a good fit for 1, 2, 3 reasons. And we feel that this script resonates with your personality and what you do on social. How do you think we can improve it? How can we make it better to talk to your audience? And then we make those changes. I hear this commonly within the influencer marketing space from influencers and content creators that I've worked with, is that one of their main pain points and struggles that they have is that brands not giving them enough creative freedom or regal space and room to play around with the content. At the end of the day, as a brand, if I'm hiring an influencer to achieve a certain objective, of course, it is my right to maintain, brand consistency and make sure that messaging is correct and whatnot. But we also need to, as marketeers, appreciate that these people know their audiences much better than we would, because they engage with them on a daily basis and give them that creative space and freedom to be able to make recommendations and be a bit more open-minded towards that. So yeah, after we pan out what type of campaign it is that we're doing, we approach the influencer, talk to them about it, and are very much involved in the entire process to make sure that it ticks off the different boxes that we need, but is also extremely authentic to the influencer. So he or she will create the content, and that's everything from photos to even copy and whatnot, and afterwards send it for us to take a look at. Now, what's currently happening today is that as I scroll through, for example, my Instagram, I see a lot of influencers publishing content. Unfortunately, you can immediately tell by just reading like the copy or the caption on Instagram that they didn't write this if you're like a follower of that person. And that's where a lot of the times the campaigns don't perform as well, because you can easily tell that it was someone on the brand or agency side that told them, okay, you need to write this copy and post it. And I also think that influencers should take a better stand at demanding a bit more creative space to be able to execute better.
So that's quite a tightrope to walk, brand values versus creative freedom.
100%. I think it is and will continue to be the debate for years to come. But I do believe that there's a lot of amazing brands out there that are doing it right and are giving influencers more creative space. And I think the minute that a couple of brands do that and people see the noise and see the success that's happening because of that, is great. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of creators that need to be steered in the right direction. But what I'm really saying is that what's the point of hiring an influencer putting reach aside, because I can, in essence, I could achieve reach from ads, right? I can run Facebook or Instagram ads or Snapchat ads or on any social platform and achieve the number of reach. I think it's the added value is the association with that influencer, as well as the content that we're creating. And people are more likely to buy from an influencer recommendation than they are from you running an ad on social. And that's just proven truth from numbers and fact.
Yeah, and I guess a nice way of making sure that the gap is reduced is to make sure when you're profiling the influencer, you get the right influencer as close to the product value, brand value you're trying to talk about. So that at least maybe the tone of voice may differ, but at least the conversation looks as close to the brand as possible and is as genuine.
Yeah, 100%. I think the more time and effort that's put in the mapping and the planning phase, the better that the campaign results end up being. It leaves less room for surprises in the end. And I know that before it just used to be, let's work with influencers, and that would usually be the brief. I've done a lot of time on the agency side, and I used to get a lot of briefs that we want to work with influencers, and the question would be, okay, but
yeah,
what are we trying to, where are we going with this? And it's good brand association. We want to work with influencers, but then that doesn't give a lot of room to properly do planning and mapping. And, that was again, back in the day. So it's been years since that. I think all of us as marketeers have understood the value of planning and mapping in the influencer space, but it definitely eliminates surprises.
Yeah, that's, so if that tells me, like, when you're at the mapping stage and it's very physical as an, because earlier, as you said, maybe in 2016, 2017, number of influencers were very less. And let me say it was much more pure. So today, is there any platform where if I want to go as a brand owner, and if I'm not working for a big brand, I'm an SMB and I want influencer program, are there platforms where I can go and see and select and get a conversation going? Or is it the good old word of mouth world out there where I just go around looking for the right kind of influencer that fits my brand?
Look, I think there's definitely a lot of platforms. Software is popping up every day. So every other day you see a lot of different platforms popping up, and also a lot of current social media software is introducing new modules to accommodate for influencer marketing. There's two ways of doing things. I think the first way is that I personally, as a human being, I have this mindset of, regardless of your limitations, whether it's your budget or the amount of resources that you have, I like to get things done. So the first good old fashioned way is that if, for example, you're looking for a content creator that is particularly interested in fashion, the minute that you find one, you can immediately find hundreds, because influencers are friends with other influencers. And if you see who they're following, if you manually go in and see who they're following, you will be led to a lot of doors will open for a lot of different influencers. But in terms of platforms, there are definitely different platforms. One of them is called Achu. And yes, it does sound like I sneezed, but that's the name of the platform. They're pretty much an influencer marketing platform. That's all they do. There's another one that's called Vine Lab. There's also Talkwalker. Some that are more relevant to the region. There's influencers.ae, which is an influencer marketing platform where you can search, filter. Social Bakers obviously have their influencer marketing platform as well. And I think there's a few differences between all of these, right? Because you have Upfluence, you have Creator IQ, but there's a few key differences between them. And then that's where you need to understand what your requirements are from these platforms and knowing what it is you want. So some of them can only help you with the influencer mapping phase, where you're able to search, quickly filter by an influencer's demographic, where their location are, what their follower base is, how much money they charge, that type of stuff. Others are able to do that, plus also get you contact information or allow you to contact them directly on the platform and agree on everything. And some of them have end-to-end influencer management. So all the way from mapping, planning, approval of content, legal paperwork, payments, and reporting and measuring success. So it really depends on the resources that you have in place and you have in-house. I think all the tools are extremely useful. It depends on what you have. So for example, I currently have a influencer marketing manager in-house, which means a lot of things such as the agreements and the payments and that type of stuff. I have no use for that being on a platform because we already have our own processes and systems in place of how to do that. So it really depends on the organization. But there's definitely a lot. And I think day by day, there's just more popping up. I know that Sprinkler as well is working on, I believe, a release of an influencer marketing platform. If that hasn't already been released, then that should be extremely interesting to take a look at.
That brings me to the most important question, ROI. How do I define ROI? Because that's the biggest challenge any marketer faces when he goes back. And it starts from the brief, right? So I understand a lot of on the client side, they say the brief is not clear, and then the agency has to take that brief. And finally, when it comes down, what was the efficiency of this influencer campaign? So how do we measure ROI in influencer program?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And I think it's something that everyone will always have doubts in. There's a lot of things that are extremely easy to measure and very straightforward, but then there's also a lot of things that are assumptions. So I think first and foremost, you go back to your point, to the business objective, right? Did I want to achieve awareness? Did I want to achieve sales? What is it that I wanted to achieve? If you wanted to achieve sales and you simply make sure that you have trackable links that you gave the influencer, and then you track that, and in the end, in the back end in GA, you're able to see sales and what's happened, or you create a specific landing page for each influencer to monitor that. It depends on your tech setup in the back end. So that's pretty straightforward, and you look at that. But even when you look at that, or you have a promo code and you look at how many usages, how many times that promo code was used, there's still a lot more to it to look at, because sure, that's number one, but then number two, you also need to take a look at what's the halo effect or the association value that I get from working with these influencer for my brand long term. So today, I may have done an ad about a certain brand, and you've followed me on Instagram and you see it. You may not necessarily immediately purchase, but the next time you see me do another ad, or you see another person do it, or it comes up in a conversation with one of your friends and they say, oh yeah, that's really great, that ends up in essence leading you to make a purchase. So there's a long-term effect that can't be measured. But the best way to do this is to take this as a certain percentage of the, for example, sales value that the influencer generated. And that really depends. I've worked with so many different brands, and in every brand, I think that percentage is a number that we all agree on internally of, yes, this makes sense, or no, this is too high, or whatnot. I've seen it range anywhere from 5% to 20% in value. And then you also take a look at the content production value. So if the influencer is creating content fully on their own, yourself or your agency is not involved in the production of this content, how much would it have costed me to produce content like this to use and run as Facebook ads? So if I was to brief my agency, how much would they have quoted me for this as well? So I take a look at those three things. Obviously, the first part that we were talking about, sales, it doesn't necessarily have to be sales. So for example, if it is awareness, I would take a look at how much, let's say the influencer reached 1.2 million people. How much would it cost me on Facebook ads or Instagram ads, depending on what platform the influencer is posting on, to be able as a brand reach 1.2 million people? Obviously, when you do it that way, and especially for reach, influencer marketing, then you look at it, and if you only look at that number, you'll understand that influencer marketing in this case wouldn't be ROI positive, because it's much cheaper for you to pay a couple $100 to get the 1 million reach rather than paying a couple thousand for an influencer to do that. And that's where, all the other stuff like the content production value and the association value comes into play and is extremely important.
That answers a lot of questions in my mind. I mean, right from having a different segment of influencers and how to measure ROI to have the very base objective. I think a lot of these things goes back to the fundamentals of marketing, where you have to make sure that you have the right fundamentals in place. And just like any channel that you use for marketing, you can go wrong with your Facebook ad also. You can go wrong with your Instagram, Google ads also, if the planning and the fundamentals are wrong. So influencer is marketing, from what I can conclude, is another channel which used well can give you as good ROI, better ROI, if planned well and executed well. Mike?
100%. You nailed it.
Yeah. So I guess it goes back to that. I'm sure my audience has found tremendous value in this. And thanks a lot, Mike, for coming onto the show. I found huge value. I'm sure my audience will also have found that. And anything you want to say before we sign off?
Of course, I thank you again for having me. It's a pleasure. And if you or any of the audience ever need any help with influencer marketing or have any questions, I'm more than happy to help answer those as they come in.
Yeah. So you can find Mike on LinkedIn as with the same name, Mike Alnaji. I'm sure that he will be out there to help you out. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thanks once again.